Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Four Lads This Week in History. We've been going most of the summer with this one and we're now on to July the 8th to July the 15th when we will look back on each date over the next week and find an event or a person associated with that particular date. But it wouldn't be the same without a co-host, and my co-host this week is the one, the only, everyone's favourite podder, Andrew. How are you, pal?
I'm very good, Davey. I'm very good. I'm melting in the heat, obviously, but I would much rather have this to be a problem to worry about than being too cold or something like that. So, I'm well enough.
You would choose to live in the tropics of London right enough, wouldn't you? So
exactly, yeah. It's jungle that I live in,
Yeah. So, as I say, for those that haven't seen the podcast before, quite simply, we'll go over the next 7 days and look back on each of those dates for an event in Rangers history. And we'll start with July the 9th. Did I say 8th earlier on? I did.
You did. Oh, I wasn't like David.
Me.
But I know you have a
track of time already. July the 9th. I can only apologise for saying the 8th. July the 9th, Thursday, July the 9th today, and that's where we're going to start. And I'm going to go right back, and I'm going to apologise at the start to you, Andrew, because usually I only put one oldie in it, but I've actually put two in it this week.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a reason for that, which will become clear as we go on. So July the 9th, 1888, which was a year known for something else, unfortunately. But in 1888, July the 9th, Jimmy Bowie was born in Partick in Glasgow. Now, I'm quite sure the vast majority of people watching this podcast will say, I know David Bowie, but I don't know Jimmy Bowie. Who the heck was he? So he was a Rangers player back in the day. So he joined Rangers from Queen's Park in 1910. And he played for Rangers for 12 years. He won 6 league titles. He played more than 350 games, scored 70 goals, and was the club captain by the time that he retired in 1922. So he had a pretty impressive Rangers playing CV. The one thing missing on it was the Scottish Cup. For those that know Rangers history, they'll know that Rangers went 25 years from 1903 to 1928 without winning the Scottish Cup, and his career coincided with the hoodoo years, as they were known at the time. The closest he came was actually 1921 when he played in the final against Partick Thistle, and he tore his shorts. He had to leave the field, and while he was off the field changing his shorts, Partick Thistle broke up the park and scored him the goal of the game. Yeah. Talk about the luck of the Scottish Cup there. That was exactly it. So I don't know if you've heard much about Jimmy Bowie, but that playing career isn't why I'm going to talk about him. But I'm just wondering if you know anything about him before I talk about why he is in the show tonight.
No, and I won't spoil the reveal for you, Davey. But I didn't do any research after you sent over the agenda for this one in particular because I want to hear this story. Because certainly from that era, I don't think that length of service is particularly uncommon. Players obviously sign for longer stretches. A decent run of trophies. I mean, it's Rangers, so if you've played in the majority of our eras, you'll generally have picked up a good amount. But yeah, I think it's absolutely his post-playing career that we're going to be looking at as the interesting bit here.
Yeah, I'll mention one other quick thing when he was a player, because I meant to mention it a minute ago. You might have heard of Walter Tull, the Black Army officer that joined Rangers in World War One, and he never actually played for us. He died in the trenches before he actually was ever played in 1917. It was actually Jimmy Bowie who recommended Walter Tull's signing to Rangers because he played golf at Turnberry with Walter Tull's brother Daniel.
Okay, so business continues to be done in the same way that it
absolutely.
was back then. Right, okay, reassuring.
But anyway, Jimmy Bowie eventually retired at the age of 34 in 1922. And 3 years later, he was elected onto the board of directors at Rangers. Now, he wasn't the first ex-player to become a director. There had been ex-players up until then being directors. His time as a director coincided with the building of the main stand. So the iconic main stand was opened in 1929. Jimmy Bowie had this famous quote at the time that this is our new main stand. It holds 10,000 people and 10 times more than that want to play for Rangers every week. It was that kind of thing he said. But 1934 was when Jimmy Bowie made Rangers history, because he was elected to be the chairman of the club. And that made him unique in that he was the captain of the team on the field, and he was the chairman of the club then off the field. Something that no one else has ever done. There have been other players who have become directors. There have been managers who've become directors.
Yeah.
But he's the only one that's ever was the team captain who became the chairman. He actually also held office with the SFA as well. He was a pretty powerful man in Scottish football. Rangers won lots of trophies in his time as chairman. I won't go through them all. They won. It was a Struth era, so we were pretty dominant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just picked them up. Fun.
But there's a quite unfortunate ending to the Jimmy Bowie story. After talking about the length of service he gave the club in all kinds of different ways. In 1947, Bowie made it known to the rest of the board that he felt that Bill Struth was now too old to be the manager. Struth was now into his 70s. His health wasn't that great. And Bowie recommended to the rest of the board that the great captain Davy Meiklejohn should be approached. He was the manager of Partick Thistle then, should be approached to replace Bill Struth. And he said Bill Struth should actually become a director. He thought that, because at that time managers couldn't be directors.
Sure.
Now, Mr. Struth got wind of this plan of Jimmy Bowie's, his chairman, and he rebelled against it, so to speak. So Struth, unbeknown to Jimmy Bowie, then started to approach directors. They started to buy shares. They started to get himself a bit of a power base within the board. And it ended up there was an EGM called. And that EGM removed Jimmy Bowie as chairman and elected Bill Struth as the first ever manager director of the club, because Struth had more shares in his side than Bowie had in his. Jimmy Bowie was doing what he thought was the best for Rangers, to be fair. And I think if you go back to the way Bill Struth's tenure ended, when he was getting towards 80 years old, he probably should have left a little bit before he actually did. But anyway, it was a pretty sad ending. And the really sad bit at the end of it is, after all those years of service to Rangers, from that day in 1947, Jimmy Bowie never set foot in Ibrox again.
Wow.
So it's a unique story with a for me, a pretty unfortunate ending.
Yeah, but I think it's what I love about our club, right? There are so many weird and wonderful stories that come out of this. I cannot think of another football club in the world. Obviously, it's unique in Rangers history that he's the only person who's done that. But I can't think of another football club where this has happened. A captain going on to being the chairman, unless it's a very tiny little, parochial little club. Certainly not something that's in the top flight. And for him to then be replaced as chairman by Bill Struth as well, which in itself is its own bit of history. Fantastic.
Struth didn't become chairman; he just became director. Somebody else became chairman. Yeah. But toppled him basically. The manager toppled the chairman, which is a really unusual thing to happen.
Which certainly hasn't happened. Although we've had some hints at that in the past at times. But yeah, as you say, we've had former players who have become director. Alice Johnson and Walter Smith obviously served as director at a time as well. But yeah, someone who had a playing career to the point where they became the captain of Rangers, then becoming the chairman of Rangers. I mean, it's unique, but I also think it's one of those things that we would not likely see in the future as well, unless something drastic changes in the world of football. Because that's just an incredible kind of ascent from one profession to another, effectively. It's one of these things. Like, I didn't want to do any research. I wanted to hear the story because, it's a story that can only exist for Rangers. It's some club, right?
I do think that probably the closest we've came to in recent years is John Gregg, obviously, because John Gregg was possibly our greatest ever captain. That's debatable, but he certainly was
greatest ever Ranger, right?
The most iconic captain, and he was in the board of directors for quite a while, but he never chaired the board. But anyway, so that was the first story for tonight, for July the 9th, was the story of Jimmy Bowie. Now, going to July the 10th. Now, I hummed and hawed about which one of these two stories for July the 10th that I should talk about. Because in 1995, July the 10th, we signed Paul Gascoigne. And I thought, oh, it would need to be something really, really meteoric to topple that story. But on July the 10th, 1989, I actually think there was a signing we made that made even more headlines than the signing of Gaza.
Yep.
And that was the day that Graham Souness announced to the world that Rangers had signed former Celtic player Maurice Johnston for £1.5 million from Nantes of France. I don't know if you're old enough, Andrew, but if you are, you'll know where you were when you heard this. When you heard the news.
I was not even 2 years old at this point, Davey. I always like throwing that in,
I know, but I should have known.
It's something that I knew plenty about growing up. Obviously, by the time I was more cognizant of this stuff, the Gaza signing is obviously something I've got clearer memories of. What was going on when I was a kid. But Mo Johnston's signing obviously marked a change in, a sort of era for Rangers. Obviously, as you're going to go on to, it's not a unique signing in terms of his religion or anything like that, but it was certainly highest profile one for a good long while. And I think that the fact that we are still now in a situation where the team across the other side of the city will try and do things to try and duplicate the shock, the awe that this created, and they still haven't managed to do it either. It speaks to how momentous it was, and I know that there was plenty of controversy around it. I mean, my old man used to have the original Follow fanzine magazines, and this was how I got part of my Rangers education. Was reading back through those, and I remember reading the articles about looking back on this and the controversy around it, that a subset of the fan base were that upset by it that were burning season tickets. But as ever with any player who starts in one place and comes over to another, if they've made the decision to go to the right team in the end, which he did, then all will be forgiven, especially if you manage to do the business in the old firms. And he is a player who did manage to do that pretty early on.
He absolutely did.
So yeah, definitely a historical moment, and yeah, I can absolutely see why this generated more headlines than Gaza signing.
Well, it did. It definitely did. I think for those that don't remember, to put it in a little bit some context round about it, Rangers had played Celtic in the Scottish Cup final just a few weeks before it. And on the eve of the Cup final, Billy McNeill, the Celtic manager, paraded Maurice Johnston at Parkhead as their new signing. So he was returning home to Parkhead, his spiritual home.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, it did give them a real boost for the final, and they beat us 1-0 in a game that we were trying to win the treble. We had won the league and the Scottish Cup. And I think Graham Souness' nose was well and truly out of joint that day. And he was determined to put one over on them in some way, shape or form. And it turned out that he found out from Maurice Johnston's agent that he hadn't actually signed for Celtic. It was all a bit premature. There was some kind of loose agreement, but no contracts had been signed and no figures had actually been nailed down at that point. So Souness being Souness got on the phone to him and basically said, how do you fancy coming to Rangers instead and earning X amount more money than you would at Parkhead? And I think it took balls of steel for Maurice Johnston to join Rangers. Yeah. For regardless of what you thought of him as an ex-Celtic player, because as a Celtic player, we absolutely despised him because he seemed to despise us. he really did seem to be one of these dyed-in-the-wool Celtic men. And I think it took real courage for him to do what he did, because he knew it wasn't as if he was somebody coming from a foreign country to become the first high-profile Catholic in a long time. He was steeped in the west of Scotland. He knew exactly what he was going to get into. And I thought it took real guts to do what he did. And I will knock it in the head straight away, because there are people who still read articles that say in it he was our first ever Catholic player, which is the biggest pile of nonsense you're ever allowed to hear. In fact, I'll throw a little stat in to tell you that Rangers played in the FA Cup semi-final in 1887. The Scottish clubs were allowed in the FA Cup back then, which is the year before Celtic were formed. We lost to Aston Villa, but our goal was scored by a guy called Pat Lafferty, who was a Catholic. So there was a Catholic playing for Rangers before Celtic even existed.
Sure.
So just don't give me all that nonsense. I don't think there is any doubt, though, there hadn't been a high-profile Catholic player for a long time. Although John Spencer was actually already in the club at that time, and he was a Catholic player, just that he hadn't quite broken into the first team at that time. He wasn't as well known. But anyway, it was a typical Soonest thing, make the headlines. You're right, there was a minority of supporters who took it very badly. There was the ones that the BBC News wanted to speak to and wanted to make it out as if they were the ones speaking for everyone. But the truth of the matter is that our crowds didn't follow afterwards.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is that Maurice Johnson had to get bodyguards everywhere he went and lived in a high security place in Edinburgh with a big wire electric fence round about it. That was nothing to do with Rangers fans. That's because of what Celtic fans wanted to do to him. It's nothing to do. It was nothing to do with us. And as you say, he then paid us back and repaid them for that in spades. He scored 3 memorable goals against Celtic, all in victories. We won the league both years he was there. In fact, I don't know if you've seen the Mark Walters interview. He speaks briefly about it, and he talks about he thought Maurice Johnson was the most ruthless finisher he ever played with. In terms of goals to chances, he talked to McCoy was the best goal scorer, but because he scored the most goals. But Johnson was actually the most deadly finisher in terms of give him a chance, he'll score. And if you look at his stats for Rangers, 98 starts, 2 substitute appearances, 46 goals. That's not bad.
Always love a return like that. Goal every game, every second game. Take that. And I would also say, just to plug some stuff, that if you do want to check out that Mark Wilson's interview, scan the old QR code just above Davy's head there, and you can get access to that straight away. Please do check that out, because it was. I've watched that, and that was a great interview. Mark's fantastic character. Yes.
I'll just give you my quick Maurice Johnson story, because you're too young, right? The day that he played his first game against Celtic at Ibrox for Rangers, his first one was at Parkhead. We drew 1 each. He didn't play very well. His second one, Celtic were challenging us at the top of the table. In fact, I don't think either of us were top of that. Aberdeen or Hearts were top of the league into that game.
Sure.
And we were second and third getting into it. Johnson scored in the 90th minute, the only goal of the game. And I'm not kidding you, it was one of the most berserk celebrations I've ever been part of inside Ibrox. Honestly, you'd think we'd won the European Cup. The place just went absolutely berserk. And that was the day that, the last day that I ever wore a pair of glasses at a football game. I got contact lenses. And my glasses ended up all broken in my face, and there was blood all over me. So contact lenses from then onwards. And that goal, I think that goal he scored against them that day set Celtic back about 5 years. They hardly won another game in the league for the next 6 months. They ended up finishing 5th, and they didn't win a trophy till 1995, and that was in 1989. I think it absolutely it kicked them right where it hurted, and they did not recover from it for ages. So Mojo, he'll never be in the Hall of Fame, he'll never be a Rangers legend and all that, but he's got a place in history, and he's got a place in history for the right reasons for me.
Oh, for sure. Like, couldn't agree more. As you said, that's part of the joy of the show. Pull out all these little strands, and Mo Johnson is obviously someone who's going to be much better known than Jimmy Bowie, but he's it's part of the history. That's what I love.
Absolutely. So I need to come a wee bit more up to date, so you can't tell me you're a toddler and things like that. So July the 11th, 2007. Don't you dare say you don't remember this. Manager Walter Smith continues his rebuilding of the Rangers squad by signing 29-year-old Lee McCulloch from Wigan for a fee of around £2 million. So, Walter's first summer transfer window when he came back, made a lot of changes, and by the end of that transfer window, we had a spine of Scottish Rangers fans in the team, which I'm starting to think history's maybe starting to repeat itself a little bit. Remember, He brought in Davy Weir. He already had Barry Ferguson. He already had Alan McGregor. He brought in Naismith. He already had Boyd.
And in fairness to Ferguson as well, he had to bring him back from. Wasn't he in Zenit at that point?
Who?
Wasn't Ferguson away?
No, but Brixton was at Zenit.
Rixon, yeah. Sorry.
Barry came back under Alan McLeish. But in effect, he created this spine of Rangers fans who didn't like losing, and I think it's a template that Rangers could have copied more often in the last 15 years and potentially have been more successful. But anyway, Lee McCulloch. So what do we think of you must have seen his whole Rangers career. So what
exactly. He was one of those guys who just seemed like he was part of the furniture because of just, in sort of modern day parlance, he was one of the more longer serving players because I think he goes through until 2015, right?
Yeah.
2014, 2015. So yeah, that's a good old chunk of time, and obviously sees through one of the more traumatic periods of our history, going down to the lower leagues. And he was one of the two players, him and Lee Wallace both, who said, no, we're staying. We're here for the long haul. And, Dvorak said, well, of course they would stay. They're on a decent pay packet and all this stuff. Like, they didn't have to stay. There are plenty of players who chose to go elsewhere. Even players who were later in their career, who could find, employment otherwise. Jig stayed, and not only did he stay, but he was an important part of that journey back to the top.
Yep.
I know that there was criticism that was lobbied at him, probably by me, quite frankly, in some games towards the end of his career, because it seemed like whatever he did, he would not get dropped. But you'd always counter that by saying he keeps delivering, though, in some way. He would find a way to contribute, whether it was as a centre-back or in the midfield in the earlier part of his career, or as a striker. I think the only position he didn't play for us was goalkeeper. I was convinced that we should have given him a spell there, just for the sake of completing the set, because he played pretty much everywhere else. So again, another one of these, as we've talked about in the past, Davey, just never going to be your 10 out of 10, my God, he's setting the world on fire kind of player, but someone, again, you could always rely on, a good servant to the club, someone who is in the Hall of Fame. And I think, you can look at his trophy allocation and think maybe, it's over, like, not quite deserved, but I think a lot of it comes down to his captaining the team through a pretty dark period in our history. And that's always going to be my abiding memory of him, just someone who stuck around. Although I will always remember the fact that he didn't start off as the captain in our lower league term. That was Carlos Bocanegra, who was the captain for the first game, which I was obviously very happy about as a fellow American. Jig then taking over once Carlos said, after I think a game against Peterhead, lads, maybe not actually, which fair enough. But yeah, I always remember Jig and what he gave to the club. Jig, again, just fantastic servant for us. Yeah,
and for me, it's a Rangers career that gets split into two sections, isn't it? It's it's like the pre-administration one, the successful bit under Walker, in effect. The successful. He won three league titles. He won 3 League Cups. He won 2 Scottish Cups. He came on as a sub in a European final. So he had this really highly successful bit at the start of his Rangers career. When I think it's probably fair to say that he was never a nailed-on starter in any one position. He'd be playing wide in the left one week. He'd play in midfield the next. He'd play up front. He'd play in the right. He played all over the place.
Utility man. That's absolutely what it was.
Exactly. He was a centre forward at Motherwell. I remember when he played for Motherwell. But and he scored a couple of the two best goals he ever scored, if you like. Leon, the game we won 3-0, he opened the scoring night with this thumping header for a corner, and a headed equaliser at Parkhead at New Year when we were 1-0 down. They scored only about 2 minutes before it, and he silenced the hope. He silenced the Celtic about a Parkhead by equalising another header for a corner. Yeah. But then you're right, that bit of his Rangers career kind of stops, and then you go into this absolute horror of the lower leagues, and what came before that, actually. And you're right, him, Lee Wallace, and I would probably throw Neil Alexander in as a third name. Amongst the ones that said they would stay when they would have had offers to go somewhere else. Of course they would have.
100%. Neil Alexander was a couple of years off of, goalkeeping for Rangers in a European run, which that went very deep, and no one expected any Rangers team to get there. All three of them would have had offers to go elsewhere. It wasn't ever going to be just play the kids. We're going to need some with experience to take us through that. The fact that he was so vocal about coming out and saying, "No, I'm staying. I'm here for the long haul," was something I think he should certainly take immense credit for.
Yeah. And I agree with something you said earlier on in terms of his induction at the Hall of Fame. I think a lot of it was to do with a nod to his loyalty and a nod to what that meant to the support, to the fan base. His numbers are pretty good. 303 appearances, 70 goals. But see, when you break that down, 50 of those goals came in the lower leagues. So, and he played up front more when third division and I think it was
I certainly remember third division, him and Andy Little finished as joint top goal scorers with 25 goals each. It says something about the quality of opposition we were up against, although it didn't mean that every single one of those games was an easy thing. Having watched all of them, I know it wasn't an easy thing. It's a slog at times, but nonetheless, like I say, he was always someone who was contributing.
Absolutely. I do think it finished kind of poorly in terms of, you alluded to it. I think he wasn't the player he was. They ended up trying to turn him into a centre-half when he was never really a centre-back, and he was just getting shoehorned into the team. And it was an awful season, that one in the Championship, and he was starting to get a bit of abuse for the crowd and stuff like that. And it didn't finish very well. But overall, a man that can look himself in the mirror for his Rangers career, and who I think at the end of all still has the respect and the admiration of the Rangers support. And that's worth a hell of a lot.
Exactly, yeah. Not every ex-player ends up with that. Certainly not recently, at least. But I think no one finished that season particularly well. You only need to look at the amount of changes that happened for the first Mark Warburton season to know how significant a rebuild was needed at that point. And we had some players who lasted a fair old while off of that as well. But we had plenty of ex-pros back at the building by that point. Chris Boyd was one that we talked about previously as well, who came back and didn't exactly cover himself with glory either. So McCulloch was there for the journey, and he is one of the players that will always have a firm place in my heart, because from that period around 2000, probably just before 2007, is when I really started paying attention to football properly, not just as, let's hope the blue team win, more as okay, well, these are our players, and this is what I want to be happening. So he's always going to have a firm place in my heart for that, if nothing else, and the loyalty that he showed is always going to be something that I think means he's earned that respect amongst the Rangers support.
I'll finish the Lee McCulloch one with I'll give you see if you ever want to win a pub quiz, I'll give you a question. I'll give you a Rangers question. He's the answer to it, right? The Rangers player that picked up the most yellow cards in his Rangers career. The answer to that is Lee McCulloch.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think something like 67 yellow cards or something like this. He beat Richard Gough by one.
And again, two players I wouldn't exactly pick out as being particularly dirty players. I'd certainly think plenty of others.
I think they played in the more modern era. There's an awful lot more bookings in it than there was in back in the day.
And length of career as well is going to factor into that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was July the 11th, Lee McCulloch. 12th of July. What do I do for the 12th of July? It feels as if there should be a band playing in the background for this next one.
I need to be careful now.
July the 12th, 2018. Rangers start the season in the first round of the Europa League qualifiers, defeating FC Skopje of Macedonia 2-0 at Ibrox in Steven Gerrard's first competitive game as Rangers manager. you remember FC Scoopy?
I did have to look up exactly who it was we were playing for this one. I think it's the only time we've ever played FC Scoopy.
Probably the only time ever.
Yeah, exactly. But I do remember this game because of the context in which it was, because I had some, unfortunately, very memorable memories. Yeah, that's a good sentence. I'll go with that. Of our previous attempts at European qualifiers the last season. I know you obviously discussed that one.
Yeah.
On the
in a hedge in
previous
Luxembourg.
Exactly. So the fact that we were able to progress through this one without any kind of major drama was good. Obviously, everyone's very excited. I'm pretty sure this was a sellout game as well. Everyone's turning up to see the first game of the Gerrard era. And if for nothing else, I would say that certainly early on, Gerrard knew how to do the European matches just fine. He was very capable of going through there. And obviously, he built a team that, although he doesn't manage it towards the end of it, takes himself all the way to a European final. Gerrard managed to get the setup all the way wrong. Like, really good in Europe and then okay in old firms, and the second season better in old firms and really good in Europe. And it was only by the third season that he started figuring out, I've got to beat the other 10 teams in the league as well. Once he put all that together, then magic started happening. But he absolutely did that the wrong way around. I mean, there's not a massive amount of memories that I got for this game specifically. I think it was more the context of what it starts, if you like. It begins that Gerrard era. But I do remember getting seeing how Gerrard was setting out a team, and you start seeing the first inklings, the way that Gerrard, yes, but also Michael Beale is starting to lay out the team, and we're seeing how it performs. Obviously, Michael Beale, good coach, maybe not so good manager, but as parts of that backroom team led by Steven Gerrard would go on to do really good things eventually. It took some time, but we got there in the end.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking up the sort of team lineups and stuff, the thing that jumped out to me was the defensive midfielder he played that night was Ross McCrory. So, so we have gone round full circle. And in goals, the man that's just came back as our goalkeeping coach. So the band's slowly getting back together. Maybe it was McGregor, Tavernier, Goldson, Katic, Flanagan, McCrory, Arfield, Windass, Candeas, Morelos, and Murphy.
See, Jamie Murphy is one of those players who I've got such regrets about, because he should have had so much more of a Rangers career. And if it not for plastic pitches, he would have had a much better Rangers career.
Absolutely.
But knackered his knee, and
he scored the first goal that night. He was the first goal scorer of the Gerrard era. He opened the scoring that night at the Brimone end in the first half. And then something that we maybe saw once or twice again under Gerrard was a Tavernier penalty.
There you go. I think I do remember that, because I remember
right at the end. It was an injury time right at the end of the second goal.
This game had gone on for a long while, and similar to the Niederkorn game, I think there was obviously concern about not killing it off and having to go to their place and figure out a way to finish this game off. So getting that extra cushion, because away goals still mattered at this point as well. It was good to have that extra little cushion there, just to make sure that things were a little more secure. Yeah,
I remember there was this big debate in follow before the game. Will Steven Gerrard wear a suit? Because seeing they played a couple of pre-season games, they wore a tracksuit in them.
Yeah.
People were starting to get the pitchforks out in case he wasn't going to put the suit on for a real game. But he did.
I mean, imagine a manager doing that these days. Honestly, you'd never get away with it. Surely, we'd have you out in like 8 games or so, right?
Yeah, and I think that maybe the last thing to say about this is, and you alluded to it, how Gerrard straight away seemed to get how to get results in Europe, because the only tie Rangers had played in the previous 5 years was that disaster in Luxembourg. So our seeding didn't exist. We had a coefficient of about 0.0001 or something. It was way.
It was only the country coefficient that we got.
Yeah, I think we were ranked about 250th or something. It was some ridiculous. Yeah. So we were unseeded even in the first qualifying round when all the Diddy teams come into it, we were still unseeded in that.
We were the Diddy team at that point. Yeah,
correct. So, and sure, we became the first unseeded team from the first qualifying round to go all the way through and make the group stage. We beat Croatian team Osijek, the one we signed Barisic from. Then we beat Maribor. McGregor saved the penalty in the away game, and then we beat Ufa in Russia.
Which is not exactly an easy away tie, given that we had to do most of it with 9 men as well.
Correct.
Don't worry, we've got a nice, easy game when we come back after the weekend. Just an old firm that's away as well. That'll be fine.
I know. So, yeah, that was the start of the Gerrard era. I'm sure as this series of podcasts goes on, we'll be picking out maybe other games from Gerrard's time as manager, but that was the first competitive one, and it happened to be on the 12th of July, which will pass without comment, which is probably wise. So I'm going to go to July the 13th, and I'm sorry, but this is the other old one. I can apologise just now. July the 13th, 1883. I'm going back even further now. A guy who was born in Glasgow called Archie Kyle. Now, Archie Kyle came from Carlton in the east end of Glasgow, which is the area that Celtic were formed in. He joined Rangers from Parkhead Juniors, and he was a Roman Catholic. So he was everything that some people tell us never ever played for Rangers. So I'm telling you he did, and he joined Rangers in 1904. In fact, I've got a little picture of him here. I'm just going to put it up very briefly. There he is. There's Archie with a typical moustache of the time. That was him. So Archie Kyle was a forward. He could play in the wing. He could play inside forward. He could play centre forward. And he had a pretty decent goal scoring record with Rangers. He was Rangers till 1908. I've got his numbers here. 135 games, if you include things like the Glasgow Cup and the Charity Cup, because they counted quite important. They were important competitions back then. Yeah. He scored 58 goals, which is not bad, considering he wasn't a centre forward. But the thing maybe to mention about Archie Kyle was he liked a goal against Celtic. He scored 7 goals against Celtic in 3 years, and he scored against them in all 4 of the main competitions. And I'm going to touch on one of those games, New Year 1907. Why do you want to talk about that, David? Rangers beat Celtic 2-1 at Ibrox, New Year's Day 1907. Archie Kyle was in the team. A guy called Colin Mains was in the team, who they signed for Port Glasgow, who was another Catholic. And a guy called Willie Kivlikin played centre forward, who scored the winning goal that day, who was another Catholic, and who actually left Rangers that summer to join Celtic. Wow. So see the whole bit about the religious divide was there right from the start. It absolutely wasn't. And Archie Kyle is the embodiment, I think, of the falsehoods that we read now over and over again about Rangers. If ever anyone was born to play for Celtic, according to this modern thinking, a guy from the Carlton who was a Catholic, who was brought up within a stone's throw of Celtic Park, played for Rangers and loved scoring against Celtic. So, and I know you've probably never heard of him, but I'll tell you a little bit about his post-Rangers career in a moment. But Archie Kyle, is there anything you want to throw in about the man with the moustache?
No, I mean, first of all, fantastic moustache. Always going to appreciate that. Style at the time, right? But again, it's one of these reasons why I love these pods, Davey. It's because we can dig into this history. We can see so much of the ways that the team's evolved and changed throughout all the years. And yeah, seeing a player go from Rangers to Celtic, obviously, that he played with, that's disappointing to see. Never like to see that. But again, it just it marks out that as you say, that like sectarian divide just wasn't really there back in the day. You know, you point to plenty of reasons why that started becoming more prominent as we came into the modern era, but that's maybe best discussed at another time. I think it is just one of those things where, as you say, modern day, or let's say a certain era, it would have been a much less likely story that he plays for Rangers. But again, as you say, someone who loved to do the business, especially where it counted.
It's just as a quick aside, the guy Willie Kivlican, the Catholic that scored the winner in that game in 1907, who then joined Celtic, he was actually training to be a doctor, and he qualified as a doctor, played for Celtic for years. He actually scored a few goals against Rangers when he was a Celtic player. He actually put his career on hold during World War One. He went. Oh, hold on, my phone's going off. He went and put his career on hold World War One, joined the army as a medic, and served out in the trenches and tended wounded soldiers in the trenches.
Wow.
And when he came back after World War One as a doctor, he ended up becoming the Celtic club doctor. Okay. And if you've ever seen the story of Sam English and John Thompson, and unfortunately the Celtic goalkeeper was killed in an accidental clash with Sam English in a Rangers Celtic game. Willie Kivlican, the ex-Rangers player, was the Celtic club doctor on the pitch trying to tend to John Thompson that day.
Wow. It's part of this, again, it's the history. You see how many of these different threads will end up coming together again. The Sam English story is obviously one I've heard before.
I'm sure I'll do Sam English in a future pod. I'm sure I will.
For sure, yeah. But again, you see those little threads coming together. A former Rangers player who became a Celtic player, who had a brief stint in World War One as a trench doctor. It's the kind of thing that is one of the reasons I love this club so much. It's because we have that history that you can pull into. So many different little stories that you can pull out and see how all the little threads come together. It's fantastic. I love it. So
the last thing, it was actually meant to be about Archie Kyle. I said the last thing I'll talk. He made the headlines a couple of times after his playing career. The first one being not a very good thing. So in the 1920s, him and an ex-Celtic player called John Browning were convicted in court of attempted match fixing. They were trying to bribe a Hamilton Accies player to throw a game. And the two of them get sentenced to 60 days hard labour. Interesting to know what hard labour was back in the 1920s. God only knows. And the other thing is, Archie Kyle ended up, he got married, kids, and one of his daughter had a son. And I'm going to put his grandson up on the screen just now. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I was wondering why this image was in there. Yeah.
That there, pop star Frankie Miller, who had a hit with Darwin in 1978. He also was the first one to record, I think, Caledonia, that song Caledonia. He recorded that. He's a well-known pop star and songwriter.
Maybe I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if my old man has that record at home.
Well, so, Frankie Miller was an altar boy in the East End of Glasgow, devout Roman Catholic, but his granddad was Archie Kyle, who played for the Rangers.
Wow.
So anyway, that was Archie Kyle. Don't say we don't. That's us bringing music and everything into this podcast now.
It's an education.
What can we do? Okay, so we're going to go to July the 14th, the second last of our dates. And July the 14th, we're going to go far more up to date, 2003. So hopefully you'll remember this one. Blackburn Rovers manager Graham Souness confirms the signing of Rangers central defender Lorenzo Amoruso for a fee of £1.4 million, a transfer forced by the financial situation at Ibrox. So basically at the end of the Rangers career of Lorenzo Amoruso. Got a few things I could say about Big Amo, but I'm going to let you go first. What's your Amoruso memories?
I've got very fond memories of Amo. I mean, he obviously a player with a lot of love in his heart for Rangers. A lot of his love in his heart in general, heartless sleeve every time he played. And I've heard so many stories and interviews that he's done since leaving Rangers about, let's say, his forthright opinions on some of the managers he served under. But I mean, my abiding memory, unfortunately, is probably the last time that he played for us, which was leaving the Scottish Cup. Tears in his eyes, because I think he knew at that point that he was going. And I'd never seen a player for Rangers who had been that emotional about it. Obviously, it's football, man's game, none of that kind of nonsense. But it was all Lorenzo. It was all passion. And I don't think it's not something you can train into someone. It's not something that you can, duplicate. It's not something you can really replicate by rote or anything like that. It's just you feel it. And he was absolutely one of those players who just heart in his sleeve. Anytime he played for us, he's one of those few players who I always look at and go, he just loved playing football. I think of definitely different types of players, but Ronaldinho was one who was very similar to me in that he looked like he was just having a blast every time he was on the pitch. And Lorenzo was one of those guys who loved playing football. Loved playing for a big important team like Rangers and loved winning stuff for us as well. Had, I think, 6 years that he was with us for, right?
But this summer of '97 he signed, because Walter signed him for the 10 in a row season. Then remember he was injured just like the whole season. He didn't appear till the Cup semi-final against Celtic in April.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure he's picked up his share of trophies in that 6 years, right? So, exactly, right? So, not too shabby for only 6 years. Loved him as a player. I'd kill for a team of Lorenzo Amoruso's these days because you're going to play with passion, if nothing else.
Yeah, I must admit, I love the big guy, and you can talk about the first couple of years under Advocat. So Advocat made him captain. I'm not going to talk about his religion because I've talked about religion enough tonight, but there's a thing in there about he was appointed captain and nobody batted an eyelid. So it tells you again about how unimportant this actually all is there. But he was appointed captain and everything went right for the first couple of years. We won the treble in Advocat's first season with him as captain. We beat Celtic in the cup final and he was an absolute rock that day. Him and big Colin Hendry beside him. We actually remember when Rangers signed Colin Hendry, I think Hendry expected to be the captain. I think David Murray expected him to be the captain, but Advocat had already appointed Amoruso and he wouldn't change it. So anyway, he won the treble as a captain, one of only 6 treble-winning captains in Rangers history. Then the second season, we should have won the treble. We won the double. Everything was tickety-boo, best team in the country by a mile. In the third season, it went to shit. O'Neill came in at Celtic. We brought in Rickson and Conterman, and the balance of the team just all went to buggery, and we started losing games we should never have lost. And Amoruso made a couple of big high-profile mistakes, and Advocat took the captaincy off him. Yeah, he gave it to Barry Ferguson, and I think that period of time is the bit I admire most about Amoruso. Because for someone who didn't have Rangers history, for somebody who doesn't come from this country, for somebody club you wouldn't have thought meant that much to him, to have the captaincy taken off him in such an embarrassing, humiliating way, I certainly expected him to ask for a transfer. I thought he would just pack his bags and you wouldn't see him again. And yet, he gave us another 3 seasons of absolutely sterling service. And not only did he still give absolutely 100% every game, but he was so important to the team. Yeah. When Celtic had Larsson and Hartson and Sutton, Amoruso and Craig Moore, the battles they had with whatever 2 Celtic players played up front, defined who won the game a lot of the time. They were that important. And I can't speak highly enough of the way Amoruso handled what must have been the biggest slap in the face he ever had, and still gave Rangers absolutely everything that he had. And I'll just throw the stats in just now to 222 games, 24 goals. Now, that's better than a goal every 10 games for a centre half. That's actually pretty good for a start. There was the odd free kick and thunderbolt for the edge of the box in them. Although I used to dread going to away games behind the goal and Amoruso was lining up a free kick, I must admit. Because you had as much chance of getting knocked out by one of them as you did as watching it getting in the top corner. But anyway, 222 games, 24 goals, 3 league titles, 3 Scottish Cups, 3 League Cups, 2 trebles, Hall of Fame. That's no bad. That's not bad. And he absolutely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame for me. I know there's a lot of folk will say, well, he wasn't there that long and he didn't play that many games, blah, 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 blah. But he really done Rangers a huge bit of service. And he scored some big goals, scored against Celtic a couple of times, PSV Eindhoven in the Champions League. One that I always enjoyed, there was a riot up at Aberdeen one day and the teams get taken off and they come on and then he scored this absolute 30-yarder about 2 minutes after the teams came back on. So, yeah, loads of great memories of Amoruso, and I think it's a shame he left when he did and why he did, because there's no way he would have left if it hadn't been for the financial situation with him.
Yeah, I think this is where we start seeing some of the warning signs for the trouble that's going to come down the pipeline less than 10 years later, right? And it was a shame. Like, again, got the memory of him from the Scottish Cup when he knows he's going. But it did just seem to be that thing that happened every time we come around to the summer. It'd be like, okay, well, who are we going to lose this time? You know, it became a lot less about who were excited to see come in. Excited players, obviously, but it was knowing that we were just bit by bit having the team chopped away, season by season, and he was absolutely one of the harbingers of that. So. Yeah, I mean, nothing but fond memories for Lorenzo Amoruso. As I said, he's always someone who's going to be close to my heart because of that passion. It's always going to be something I love to see in my Rangers players. I want to see them having a good time while they're doing it. If they look like they're enjoying it as well, that's always fun. But yeah, rock of a man, as you say, part of that defence that could set the tone, which we have had far too few players in recent years who have been unable to set the tone or able to set the tone. He was absolutely someone who could do that. If you saw that he was in the mood for a game, then you knew that you'd be okay, or at least the defence would be.
Yeah, big Amo. So he was July the 14th. Final one, July the 15th, 1993. So I know you're going to say you were in nappies or something. That's fine. It's fine. But anyway, July the 15th, 1993, you certainly know the player. Rangers break the British transfer fee record by signing Dundee United's Duncan Ferguson for £4 million. And just to have yes, Rangers really did break the British transfer record for people who are a bit younger than me. Actually, Manchester United signed Roy Keane a couple of weeks before it from Nottingham Forest for £3.75 million. And that was the British transfer record. And Jim McLean, the manager of Dundee United, would not sell Duncan Ferguson to us. He kept saying he would sell him only to a team down south. And we ended up paying more than Man United paid for Roy Keane to prize him away from Dundee United. He had recently became a Scotland international. He was probably about a 10-year contract at Dundee United, probably the way Jim McLean used to work. Hottest property in Scottish football. Mark Haley was well into his 30s by this time, and Walter had obviously seen him as Mark Haley's successor, leading the line in the Rangers forward line. I'll get into his Rangers career just in a minute, but apart from being a World Cup pundit these days and being a guy that likes chasing burglars out his house doing at Everton, what do you know about Big Duncan?
Yeah, again, I was out of nappies by this point, Davey. I was 6, so I just about managed to master using the loo the correct way. But yeah, never going to have the clearest memories, obviously, at that time. I think I was absolutely still in that era of I want the blue team to win. Yay, the blue team won. So not got a lot of abiding memories of him contemporaneously, but I do know there's probably one incident that we're going to discuss. That means that he was particularly notable. He did only stay with us for a season, and I don't want to say it's strictly because of this incident, towards the start of it, but I don't think it really helped matters too much. And when you're talking about players with the most yellow cards, if we get a couple more seasons out of Duncan, then we get a few more yellow cards there.
Yeah. So, as I say, when he joined Rangers, the Rangers support genuinely thought we were going to see the guy that was going to be the Rangers centre forward for the next 10 years. That's what we all thought at the time. And it just did not work out for a number of reasons. And the first reason was actually when he joined, he had an injury. So he couldn't play at the start of that season.
Mm-hmm.
And Hateley started that season in fire. He was incredible. That was the year after we almost got to the Champions League final. We'd won the treble.
Yeah.
And we were the walking wounded after it. Gorham was injured, Davy Robertson was injured, John Brown was injured, Alan McCoy was injured. Half the team weren't there at the start of that season. And Hateley carried them. He was like a one-man band week after week. Totally undroppable, totally irreplaceable that season. He won all the Player of the Year awards that season, Mark Hateley. So, and round about him with guys like Ali Maxwell and Stephen Presley and Fraser Wishart and guys like that, all filling in for these guys that were missing. So Ferguson eventually made his debut. It was at Parkhead, actually, on a each draw. But he got injured again. And it ended up, I think he only played about 9 or 10 games in his first season. Wow. But one of them was the game you're alluding to against Wraith Rovers at Ibrox, when he actually scored his only goal for us that season, that day. But it's not remembered for his goal, and it's not remembered for Rangers winning 4-0. It's remembered for him and a Wraith Rovers player called John McStay going head-to-head, let's put it that way. And I think Duncan's head travelled in a slightly faster velocity than John McStay's head did. McStay ended up on the turf. Ferguson didn't get booked. Nobody in Ibrox that day seemed to take any great exception to it. But it was shown on television, and it ended up, the police decided to investigate it. Now, the complication was that when he was at Dundee United, he had been charged and convicted of assault twice. And the second time, some incident, a taxi rank, if I remember rightly, he got given a suspended prison sentence.
Sure.
So if he get found guilty of something else within 2 years, whatever it is, he would then go to prison. So the police were investigating this headbutt, and it took them ages. It hung over him for ages and ages. And I remember the SFA giving him a 12-game ban before the police had ever decided what they were going to do. Yeah. Which ended up, I think, the ban got chucked out in court because it was seen as prejudicing a police investigation.
100%.
Anyway, the next season started, and he actually wasn't the team at the start of that season. He scored the winner on the first day of the season at Motherwell. A new signing called Brian Loudon ran 50, 60 yards with the ball and put it on a plate for him. He scored a hat-trick, I think it was against Arbroath or somebody in the League Cup. So he started the season quite well. But then news came out that he was going to get charged with this assault in the Wraith Rovers game. And Ferguson decided he wanted it at Scotland.
Yeah.
And I can't say I blame him. Right? So he went on loan to Everton. So did Ian Durant, actually, but Durant came back. And as I say, he went away to Everton, and it ended up that the loan was made permanent and he didn't come back. Yeah. But during his time at Everton, eventually this assault charge on John McStay went to court. He got found guilty of assault, despite the fact he didn't get booked, despite the fact there was police all around the perimeter, and they didn't arrest him at the time. But anyway, and he ended up getting sentenced to, I can't remember what it was, 12 weeks or something in Ballinnie. So he spent time in Ballinnie. He'd won 7 caps for Scotland by that time. He said he would never play for Scotland again. And he never came back to Rangers. His loan got made permanent down at Everton. I'll always think of Duncan Ferguson as the right player at the wrong time. Sure. I always think of one that got away, one that might have been. His Rangers stats are pretty awful, actually. 23 games, 5 goals. I mean, it's and I've seen that only 12 starts in those 23 games because Mark Hateley was
exactly. Yeah.
And when you see what he became down south, especially at Everton, he was an absolute wrecking ball down at Everton. That's what we could have had And I think some circumstances on the pitch, especially around about Hateley, and a lot of circumstances off the pitch and how he was treated, combined to make him leave Rangers far earlier than we all wanted. And it's a shame how it ended. He was a smashing player. I don't know. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I'm struggling to think if there's been a Scot since the English Premier League started that scored more goals in that league than Duncan Ferguson. There might be, but I can't think who it is.
Yeah. I think, I mean, we were talking about Lorenzo and players playing with their heart on their sleeve. You know, that's definitely big dunk. Obviously going to be significant because the last name and all that as well. But yeah, I think it is the circumstances are always going to be against him there because, as you say, if we're just talking about him purely as a player, then he probably doesn't get mentioned unless he's got, a weird stat that ends up as, director of Rangers later on, something like that. Right? It's more the controversy that surrounds him for that Wraith Rovers game. And I do remember at the time when, again, I'm reading the old Follow fanzine and I'm checking out these articles and talking about how can they ban him? Like, he's not been found guilty of anything. Nothing happened on the pitch. What's the story here, And I mean, I'm all of 6 years old at the time. So, I do have a fairly simplistic, view of right or wrong. But even at that point, I still thought that doesn't seem quite fair. And I don't really think my view on that's evolved since then, I'll
tell you, there was one other thing that happened in that court case. Remember Donald Finlay, who was the Rangers vice chairman at the time. He was one of the top defence lawyers in Scotland. Rangers obviously had Donald Finlay, so he was going to defend Duncan Ferguson in that case. And the judge wouldn't allow Finlay to defend him because he said that you were in the crowd that day, therefore you're a witness. You can't be a witness and be the defence counsel.
Wow.
How ridiculous is that?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess, sure. But again, it just speaks to the madness of the circumstances. I mean, cannot think of too many other instances where someone's been hauled up on an assault charge after the game's taken place. It's not like it was a horrible challenge that warranted an investigation on the pitch or anything like that. Referee doesn't even blow up for it. So, yeah.
I think if at the time the referee had decided it was a headbutt and sent him off, I think that'd have been the end of it.
Yeah.
I think it was the very fact that it made so many headlines and it was on the news because there was no punishment at the time for him.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that would absolutely be the case. But again, it speaks to one of these things, unless it is actually assault, just taking a weapon to him or something like that, then I don't really think, it's a football game. Ultimately, the decision has to happen on the pitch. That's where the decision should be. But probably, again, a sign of things to come when that happens.
Yeah, so that was July the 15th. Duncan Ferguson, a Rangers career that was not what we all expected it to be and hoped it would be. But I still think he was a hell of a player, and I really wish he could have been the Rangers centre forward for years. Anyway, so Andrew, that is this week in history. How did you find it?
As ever, very educational. Always enjoy it. And a player called Ferguson, and we're wondering what could have been. Imagine, right? Couldn't be us nowadays, right? But yeah, as ever, I mean, the stories that we've gone through tonight, Davey, Jimmy Bell is the one that I'm going to be pulling out at parties for a while. That's going to be a cracker. And yeah, it's always an education and hell, the opportunity to relive some happy memories there as well, Davey. So
that was wonderful.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying the series, and I hope, folk, if you've watched this far, you go back and check out the other episodes as well if you haven't already, because they're well worth a watch.
Brilliant. Cheers. So it just all that's left is for me to say thanks very much for those that are watching. Thanks very much for the comments we've had for previous shows. I do read them all, and I do appreciate them all. And thanks to our new sponsors, CBD Oil Scotland, Candid, good old Amrit, LBJ Consultants, Metaclad, and Elite. I must admit, they're two new ones for me, so I don't know enough about them yet, but I'll find out more about what they do in years and weeks to come and be able to say more about them. So again, for this week in history, thanks very much for watching. Until next week, bye for now.
The Four Lads Rangers podcast is sponsored by Candid, LBJ Consultants, CBD Oil Scotland, Elite Scooter Scotland and Metaclad, Four Lads exclusive roofing partner, in partnership with Black Rooster, Art of Gold and Rangers Youth Development Company. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Four Lads podcast is delighted to be sponsored by CBD Oil Scotland. Get a massive 30% off now for all their gummies and their oils. Go and check them out. These help with things like stress, anxiety, sleep patterns, mood, depression, even stuff like fibromyalgia. Go and check them out, cbdoilscotland.com. Use the code 4lads to get a massive 30% off. You enter right now and you'll be in the hospitality draw for tickets for Rangers versus West Ham. Derek McInnes's first game in charge, and you will get that opportunity not only to get 30% off, but you'll also be in the draw for hospitality tickets for West Ham. If you don't want to use the website, you can come into either shop here in Thornley Bank or in Kinnan Park. It's called Bits and Bongs. You go in there, use the code 4lads and you'll get a massive 30% off. We're delighted CBD Oil Scotland are sponsoring 4lads. Check it out and go and help yourself to some oils, some gummies with a fantastic 30% off.